Kermit Zone with our very special guest star, you, the listener. Yay! It's time to fetch your headphones. It's time to check the mics. It's time to chat pop culture on the Kermit Zone tonight. It's time now for a shake-up. It's time to go sit tight. It's time to start recording on the Kermit Zone tonight. Why do we always come here? I guess we'll never know. It's like a kind of torture to have to tape the show. So now let's get things started.
Why don't you get things started?
It's time to get things started on the most sensational, conversational, observational, confrontational. This is what we call the Kermit Zone. Welcome, everybody. It's Ramble Rousers because you gotta have proper naming of things. We're hitting you with a pop culture talk zone episode. It's me, I'm me. It's Kermit the Grog, and I'm here, joined by my numerous, and by numerous I mean two of them, my normal co-hosts. Forward Progress.
Hi, I'm numero uno, I guess, or
Your numeral uno.
I don't
Your numeral
know.
I.
Numeral I.
And
okay.
joined also by numeral I. Miss Nova Rose.
Hello, hello. I am here. Hooray.
You're so exuberant, honey.
I appreciate that chill energy. I feel like this is the new intro for Talk Zone, is just coming in as hot and just as possible.
And then Rose just looks at you and is like, "Let's stop it now."
Let's take it easy. Let's chill it out a little bit. Take it down a notch.
Y'all are way too high energy for me right now.
Welcome. This is public radio. I'm talking to you now. I'm Kermit the Grog. I don't know if the microphone is picking this up, but... Okay, enough of that. Enough of the opening shenanigans. Today we are talking about adaptations of media, specifically video games, because we recently saw the new Mortal Kombat movie and had complex feelings about it, but mostly it unlocked a thought that I've had in my head for a while about video game movies and the fact that nobody has gotten it right yet. Because we have not gotten one that has been... I guess this is my argument place, so if you have a counter-argument, go for it. We have had good video game movies, but I don't think we've had a great one yet. I don't think we've gotten one that, got it yet. That felt like, yes, of course, this is the thing. And was also an interesting movie on top of that.
I definitely argue that, especially with this newest Mortal Kombat movie. Now, me, I watched, Mortal Kombat 9 as, a movie? Where it's
the game, yeah.
Yeah, where it's, all the cutscenes or whatever, and then I played 10 and 11, but, for the most part, I never really got very big into Mortal Kombat until the past 3 games, whereas I know you two were, a lot more in it.
He was. Forward was, not me. I dabble.
But
by osmosis.
My point being is maybe because I'm a lot more disconnected from the franchise, where I felt out of every single video game movie except for maybe Detective Pikachu, I felt like they captured the spirit of what it is like to play that video game. They encapsulated that really, really well. And I think it's one of the first films to actually do that.
There's a lot that we have to go through, especially when we're talking about adapting video games into film. And it's the qualifiers of what makes a video game film good or successful. And,
that's two very different things, admittedly, but we don't got it. That's a whole other podcast of what is something that is a good piece of media and what's something that is successful, because quality does not always equal money and the other way around.
Yeah,
but that's not what we're talking about today.
And I guess that's it. I'm looking at success arguably from more of a not a numbers perspective, more from a
like a general opinion,
like a very subjective term, but but it's the discussion piece of what makes a property a success in the format that it is. Like, what is that thing that does it, or what are the qualifications that make you go, okay, they did a successful job at making this adaptation a good one. And there's so many different things, and when we get to video game movies especially, it's an interesting issue, because there's historically and notoriously been a slew of bad video game adaptation films.
more bad than good.
More bad than good, yeah.
By and large.
There's a stigma associated with video game films. Basically, you almost go into any video game film, like a film that was adapted from a video game property, the expectation that's kind of set and the stigma attached to it, you go in expecting the worst.
Yep.
And then...
I mean, I know what we do because we have a history with this.
Yeah.
From other people that we know, talking about it at length and presenting all the data, so that's probably why this is very much on our minds a lot when these come out.
And it's, there's so much ground we can cover, and I feel like let's start with the most recent. Let's start with Mortal Kombat here, because it kind of gives us a bookend.
Well, let me start with my mission statement that I talked to you two about when we watched it. So my argument for why video game movies haven't figured it out yet is that I feel like our highest point, I guess we can start actually with Mortal Kombat with this, is our highest point with that movie was any time where we went, oh hey, they did the video game thing. I feel like that was our biggest pops. We cheered the most. Or like the little oh my gosh, it's you. I posit that, if you took those out, those wink moments, that movie would have very little on it that was entertaining. The actual story of it, I feel like, is just, here's a story, we got it out of the box. It's very rote. It's very executives meddled with it. It's very by the numbers. With some Mortal Kombat dressing, and the dressing they get right, but I feel like that means we haven't made it there yet. I made the same argument for Detective Pikachu, is that two things are the real strengths of the Detective Pikachu, is that they really nail Pokemon in the world, and I do think that's really important. I feel like that's an important step to this thing of making the world feel like, oh yeah, this is how it would be. But the fact that Ryan Reynolds as Pikachu is really funny, despite him not at all being in the theme or the feeling of Pokemon. But he is funny enough that it just works. But I don't think that makes it a Pokemon movie. It's not strong because of its merits about that. Even though that's a good movie and I enjoyed it.
I would 100% disagree on both accounts, but that's me.
Well, Detective Pikachu, the thing about that one is it really feels like a story you would find in the Pokemon universe brought to life. It feels like the story you would find in any one of the given games brought to life. It is the type of story that the video games tell. So this is that question about adaptation where things start to get interesting, of at what point, how much do you... how much delineation from the source material to convert it to its different format is acceptable? You take a property, a well-established property that has, that has stories built into its games and has story beats, and you're going to make a film adaptation of it. So at what point do you have to change things to fit the film narrative? And that's okay. And at what point does it cross over to, you've changed it too much, now it's not the property? And I don't have an exact answer for this. This is just a question to posit out there.
My thing with Detective Pikachu is this film, it's hard because all of us have grown up with Pokemon in some form or fashion, but I feel like that movie super captured what it would be like to live in that universe, which I think is hard to like.
Yes.
It's super hard to go do, and I felt like it captured that really well. Like, you know, not even counting anything to do with the story, just them going throughout the world. Like, it feels like Pokemon. Like, it feels like they're going throughout a Pokemon world.
I would agree with that statement. I feel like that is something that it got really right that I don't think I've seen anything else get right, where it feels like the universe.
And
it feels familiar.
And I can argue the same thing like with Mortal Kombat. Like, I watched the first Mortal Kombat movie, which people basically were like, this is the gold standard of video game movies.
Which is, as we all know, is like the bronze standards of film, but yeah.
But my point is,
it's
like,
pretty good.
I watched it, and while it did have, like, okay, you have your tournament, and you, like, have, like, your one-on-one fights, and, like, it had that, but otherwise, it's like, it was missing, like, all of the pieces that made Mortal Kombat. Like, where's, like, the big thing is, where's the blood and gore? There's none of that. Whereas the new film, it's like, it's got that coming out the wazoo, like, including some amazing fatalities. But the thing is, even if you aren't a fan of Mortal Kombat, those scenes are incredible.
Yes.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of good. I've had a few days to kind of think on this. I left our initial viewing of it with a very positive feeling, and I feel I still have a very positive opinion of it. But the more I think about the new Mortal Kombat movie, the more I think, like, I realize I had a lot of fun with it, but it's not as good of a movie as it could be.
I am in the same exact camp, where it feels like there's a lot of moments of, you got these things right, but you muddled these things really bad, and it's like...
Now, I know some of my more, you know, friends that like Mortal Kombat a lot. Like, I know a lot of them were really against, like, having that, like, mark, the dragon mark, and I'm just like,
See, but
it
that wasn't
seemed
even
weird.
that wasn't even my problem.
But I feel like that's a symptom of a problem of meta. Like, and I guess this is actually a good way of getting into it. It's like, video game stories exist... The way you take in information on them exists non-linearly. We were talking about that. The way that you took on Mortal Kombat lore was in a non-linear fashion. Mm-hmm. You picked up pieces, you played through stories, you learned about this character, you learned their backstory, and it all comes up to form this singular sort of story, sphere, shape, whatever, cube, X, whatever, in your head. But a movie has to tell it in order, and it can't hit those beats because a video game doesn't exist in a linear line. Well, and that's what makes capturing those so difficult.
My point that I was going to make
Go for it.
was, for me, I'm a massive stickler for knowing, like, okay, if you're going to have things like magic or, like, these, like, crazy stuff going on, like, I want to know at least maybe, like, a little bit of, like, just throw me some kind of bone instead of just going magic. But with this, it's like, I kind of like that they gave, like, just a little bit of a nugget of, like...
But it's like, again, it's to Ford's, you know, positive question. It's how much can you meddle before it doesn't feel like it anymore? And I guess that's the problem when you're talking about these, like, old video games where it's just like, Johnny Cage throws freaking green balls of energy. Sure. And the story doesn't have to take time to do that. It's just, it's a video game. That's what he does.
But then what about the newer Mortal Kombat games where they do explain what that is?
And that is
and that's what the story is about. Then it's specific to, like, it feels, because we've spent time telling all these other stories, that we can spend time doing that now.
Because that's the thing with Mortal Kombat in general, is it's like, it's very, like, Game of Thrones-esque, where, like, there's a lot of little stories going on, hence, like, them, like, okay, you play as this character for a chapter or two, and then so on and so forth.
Well, and I think that I have a very big thing that I've thought about that came from watching this movie in particular. some of the greatest... We've been talking about video game film adaptations. But let's sidetrack a moment and talk about video game series adaptations. TV series, or in particular, streaming service series that are actually doing some pretty interesting things right now. And the number one that comes to my mind is Castlevania.
I was hoping you'd talk about this, because I haven't seen this, so...
Castlevania is a... just... It is a enveloping, dark, well-animated, just story that takes a lot from the series of Castlevania, but doesn't start from the beginning. I love it, because it starts with Castlevania 3, I believe, is the launch point for it. But it manages to take... And you got to think about this, too, is it's basing it on lore and characters from early days of NES, SNES, and such, of video games. So the lore is that old, but it's also when we weren't developing video game lore in the way we do now. So in some ways, it can almost develop it a little further because it's going back so far.
There's a little bit more space to...
Yeah.
Go in different directions. It's like, oh, they never talked about this lore, so we can kind of explore over here.
But it's like, I think the biggest thing about it is it's able to take its time and develop these characters and develop this world where the differences in lore between, what was originally canonical in the video game and what happens in the series, you don't really mind it as much, at least for myself. I mean, I think you agree too as well, Rose, with what we've seen.
Well, it's interesting because, I'm not going to spoil, who or how or what, but there is one character, which I had never played any of the Castlevania games, but I guess they went a very different direction with his character than the video games. And it's I'm kind of torn because
I know which one you're talking
after
about.
learning what he is in the video game comparatively, it's they kind of did this character uber dirty. And it granted, it's nothing to say story-wise, it makes sense and it's interesting, but boy did they do that character dirty. He's supposed to be this badass character and
Now, granted, though, overall, how much does that change your enjoyment of the series?
Me personally, I think because I don't have quite as much of a connection to it, not all that much, but I know our one friend was really heated about that because he was really, really connected to that series.
Yeah, so... and speaking of which, I mean, this is going to land us right back to the Mortal Kombat conversation briefly here. There was a character that I think we all agree really got the short end of the stick in the new Mortal Kombat movie, and that was Goro. And...
So
yeah, and, again, I'm not going to... I don't want to give away too much, but he's barely in the movie. I understand from if you're writing this as a script, the role he's supposed to play makes it important to the story, but it kind of feels like he just shows up and then he's done.
They use your knowledge and enjoyment of the characters to go, here they are, we don't need to build them up because you already know what it is, and then they get to throw them into the rote situation. And that's what they're there for, a fan pop, for that we don't have to spend time setting them up because you already know who they are, but that can make it feel weak when it's in the movie because they're just but also it's we talked about we don't have time. There are so many characters in this movie.
Well, and I guess that's kind of my point is depending on the franchise, what if you could take the style of the Mortal Kombat movie we just got, and instead of a movie, it was serialized. on
I
like
think-
Netflix or something.
I think Mortal Kombat would work really great on HBO Max.
I think I 100%
I think
agree.
that would be a good home for it. Because I feel like with the movies, because I feel like there's, I don't know if like video games, because like I wish we had more experience with the TV stuff, because I know there's Castlevania, and I know there's The Witcher that none of us have any experience with in either realm, really.
I've heard mostly positive things.
Exactly, but it's like, I don't know, but it's just like, comic books made the jump to being adapted into movies, and people like that. Do video games get that? Are they just such a different medium? Because it's like a comic book exists in a linear fashion just like a movie does. It's practically a storyboarded out thing. But can video games do that? But is it also just like, has nobody played with our quote-unquote our toys properly? And I feel like that, I hate that that's my terminology for it, because it feels like such a like a childish way to look at it. But I feel like when we go into this movie, we're looking like, I mean, we were watching Mortal Kombat, and I guess to its detriment, but also we wanted more. It's just like, we want to see all these characters. But the problem is, if you have too many characters, you don't have enough time for anybody to do anything. But we're all just like, oh, I want to see, where's this one, there's this. And I feel like you get that in a lot of video game movies when you have a big cast, where you want to see everybody, but you can't juggle that many characters, and it just doesn't work. And that goes to my other thing, is like, when we're watching these, it feels like we just have I want to see this, and I want to see this, and it's this laundry list. We go and going, the movie needs to give me these things or I won't be happy. Which is not a good way to view a movie, but that's how we went into it, because I feel like that's how we've been trained with video game movies. Is we want to go there, we want to like tourists, we want to go see the things that we like.
Well, here's an interesting question I guess I could go ask. Especially with Mortal Kombat is an interesting one. Mortal Kombat 9, I was able to go basically watch it as a movie.
Yeah.
And that, like that worked just fine. I mean, like I could have played the game, and it was the same thing with that one more Kingdom Hearts game.
358. Oh no, wait, not 358/2. I know which one you're talking about. Back cover.
Oh, both of them really.
Whatever,
They're essentially they're just both movies. Which that one I understand because of limitations of the devices, but I think that the question is, what do we want our experience to be like? Do we just want a movie, or do we want a video game?
I've definitely had that thought, because it's just like, if I just want to see the things, why do I want to watch the movie? Why am I not playing the game? But I think there's something, video games are like, I mean, even though they've been around for, God, almost half a century, 100 years. It's almost 50 years. 70s. They came out in the 70s.
Yeah, so, yeah.
We're getting close.
Yeah.
I know, time, right? And I feel like it's the film is the gold standard. So I want my thing in film. Comics got it. I want video games. Well, and I think we just need to get over that, even though it's hard to do that, because I'm in that too.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just say, like, here's the thing, like, who says movies have to be the gold standard?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
What if video games are the gold standard, or even a combination of the two?
Well, and that's the thing of
TV.
I've posited this a couple of times here of, with the advent of streaming media platforms, your Netflixes, your HBO Maxes, etc., and the freedom and the flexibility it has given to tell stories, with a little bit more of an artistic flair, because you're not as much beholden to things like advertising breaks and such anymore. Like, shows don't have to just end at 22 minutes. Good example would be, we're currently watching, Rose and I are currently watching Falcon and Winter Soldier. We finished WandaVision a little bit ago, and those episode lengths, especially in WandaVision,
get longer.
Yeah, like they are all kinds of different. For each episode is a different length from the next episode. So, but it works for it, and it allows for kind of more, I think, flexibility and freedom in telling the story. So that's kind of one of those things that I've wondered about, having that and having a thing where you can stretch out a storyline and character arcs over like a 6-episode miniseries or an 8-episode or whatever, versus a movie, because like WandaVision, you couldn't tell that story properly in a movie.
No.
You could do it, but it wouldn't have had the same impact.
It wouldn't have worked. It wasn't shaped to be like that.
Yeah, and the things that they were able to do in the first couple of episodes there with the, you know, like the nods to old sitcoms and ways that they threw in little elements, and they played with this kind of like notion of there was all these nods to like how about like sexism and things like that got thrown in there about how our culture used to be, and how, you know, and like throwing it in our face in a way. Like in some ways it was in our face, but in other ways it was subtle at the same time, which was fantastic. But you needed that flexibility and that storytelling.
You needed the time that it didn't need to, because in a movie it would have to have been a major theme, because there's only so much time, and that's, you know.
Yep.
Well, here I guess is an interesting thing that we're starting to go find is Disney is now releasing basically Marvel, like most of it is just TV series at this point, and
until later this year.
With
Yeah,
Falcon
until
with
the world
Falcon
opens.
and the Winter Soldier being, you know, the 6 episodes, like and I was talking to you, Ford, about this, where it's just a really long movie, but it's like, it's interesting because it's like it feels like a movie, but it doesn't feel like a movie, because it's like,
It's pacing.
yeah, like it's paced really well, where it's like, and the other great thing about it is it's like you don't have to, you know, freaking sit through like the director's cut of Lord of the Rings, like sitting there for 4 hours.
Well,
like you could just watch an episode and then
I'm very
it's
glad
paced to
you
be
brought that up, because we did talk about comic book movies and successful transitions of comic book movies, but not all comic books have successfully transitioned into film format.
Correct. It's just that it's possible. We have seen movies that I would describe as great that were based on comic books.
Oh, yeah.
In a modern era. I don't think I've seen a video game movie that I would describe as great yet. I've had movies that I thought were really good that I enjoyed greatly, but when I say I feel like we just need a buzzer for this, because I always come back to it. Like, we haven't gotten, and this is a way far shot, but like a Spider-Verse. Like, Spider-Verse is golden. It gets it. It does its own thing. It plays upon what it's coming from, but it does its own. It has its own ideas. It's visually distinct and interesting. Like, it gets it. And I feel like that's a far shot, so I'll kind of back it up a little bit. But like stuff that we saw with like the Avengers or like the Dark Knight, where it was just like, here's an adaptation. But I guess a lot of those are less like, here's the literal thing that's what the story was, and more like, let's take all the ideas, stay true to them, and then kind of do our own thing with it. And I guess we come back to that, is that how much does something have to stick to things, or how much does it stray before it's too far? Because we know that there has to be some changes when you're condensing a non-linear story into a linear, 2 hour plus or minus 30 minutes line.
But I guess this is the question that needs to be asked is, for what you are looking for, like, I guess it depends on what they ultimately decide, because I feel like big movie studios want to go basically do the heavy hitters, like the AAA games, but a lot of the AAA games that I'm finding these days have like really big universes that would take way more than just a single hour-and-a-half movie to be able to do it any justice. So then it kind of like, with the things that they're trying to adapt, would they ever work?
So this is here's a question. We're going to use Mortal Kombat for this again.
Okay.
Because we brought up the MCU. The reason the MCU worked, first of all, like if the first Iron Man movie
wasn't good,
then none of this would have happened.
No.
But
because no one remembers freaking the Hulk is technically within all this.
Basically, you had a plan. You had phases. You had stages to the point
that
where
were formulated later.
Yep, to the point where you had a whole South Park video game and an episode that was based off of that concept. But you start with, like, basically the whole idea was to get to the Avengers. And start down a road and, with a few, and then it started building from there. Now, Mortal Kombat is such with its lore where theoretically you could see them doing something like it. And the example I have is, I want to say it's called Mortal Kombat Legacy. It was a short series that was digitally made by Warner Brothers. They were great artistic interpretations that season 1 was very much, each episode was based on a specific character, and it kind of went into the story of that character. So like this episode's about Sonya and Jackson Kano, and then the next episode is about Johnny Cage or you know, and yada yada yada. So that type of thing was a really interesting property, but it only lasted, you know, that little bit there. So it's like could a video game series try to do an MCU?
I think,
or is the time past for that now?
I think you need to just make a good movie first before you start going.
But see, like that,
visions of grandeur.
it's kind of the issue that I guess I was trying to bring up is, like, I'm just looking at your poster here.
Yep. I mean, that one's a little old. But
I'm going to just throw Halo in the ring.
wouldn't work.
Well, like, Halo, I think, has gotten 2 movies,
Yep.
2 TV series. I think it has another TV series on the
I
way.
didn't know about these.
And
Just talking about Red versus Blue.
it, like, every single time, it just can't capture it because it's. I think they're going too big.
I have a counterpoint that I wrote down at the beginning to make sure I remembered it. And Halo's a perfect example for this. The movies are trying to capture the story of the game, not your story with the game.
Okay.
A movie about the Halo series wouldn't feel like Halo because it wouldn't feel like your experience playing it. Because you have your... And I know everybody has their own personal experience, but, like, we have a general way that we kind of think about Halo. The concept of going online, all the armor colors, and, oh, this gun's really great. And I don't know if those can always translate to a screen, because there's such... Again... It's an interactive medium. When we even go outside, we expand even more from our non-linear thing, because you have your own personal interaction with it of just like capturing. Like Halo to me is the idea of like, oh man, that pistol is really good and the zoom is great on it, and that's an idea that is connected to Halo and is all of that. Of like in Mortal Kombat of like freaking when you do the right thing and the toasty comes out. Like that has no reason to be in a movie, but is within my tapestry and my connection to Mortal Kombat, and a movie has a lot harder of a time capturing that because it's trying to go like what's written in the books and then trying to base a story on that instead of like your experience with it. The thing where I wrote this down was Pokemon. It had a Pokemon story, but at least, and maybe this is me talking, but it's like my story in Pokemon is I'm raising my monsters up, I'm making connections to them, and we're going to whatever that's the challenge. That's the narrative in my experience with it. There's other story going on, but that was never the thing that, at least, again, this is freaking, whenever I'm talking from my own point of view, especially with this stuff when you guys are more deep in, it makes it more difficult. But, like, that's my connection to those things. The other stories going on were never that important to me because that wasn't what my connection was.
I guess going back to my previous point is maybe I think Hollywood needs to go start looking at the smaller franchises, like things that are a little bit more accessible. And one franchise I have always wanted to make a movie about because I think it would be incredible, Dead Space.
Oh, no, that's not what I thought you were going to say then.
The reason why Dead Space is, first of all, the first Dead Space is already based on a movie.
But then why would you do it again? I want to agree with you, and I do agree with you, but I'm just...
It's not based off of... It's not based off a movie, but like the ultimate like aesthetic of
Alien.
it is...
It's Alien.
No.
It's Alien.
Well, I mean, yes, but there's I guess there's 2 of them. There's Alien and there's also Event Horizon.
Okay.
Like
it is very like the Ishimura is very much the freaking ship from...
Yeah, like that. The Event Horizon was like a big inspiration for that film, and I know I read there's a book that kind of like deals like with the first mark or whatever, and I'm like, I was the whole time I'm reading this book and I'm like, this needs to be adapted into the freaking like film because
didn't that already happen?
That's my knowledge.
Yeah, there's a Dead Space movie. It's an animated Dead Space.
No, I'm not talking about the animated one.
Okay.
That one has to do with the USG issue.
Gotcha. Sorry.
No, this book has to, like, it's on Earth in Mexico, I believe. But either way, like, I think that'd be a really cool adaptation because it's like it's not big in scope. You're basically in one location the entire time, and it'd be really easy to shoot.
If you put Dead Space on that, and Isaac Clarke in the chute with the cutter doesn't show up, people aren't going to be happy, because that's not Dead Space. It's Dead Space in the books. It's like, this is my thing again. It's like, video game movies are the things that people are like the touchstone things people are aware of. If that's not there, people aren't going to like it. That doesn't mean it couldn't be good, but if you put Dead Space on the marker, and Isaac Clarke, the iconic character from that game, isn't in the film as the main character, without a good reason for it, despite the fact that he's the main character of the 3 games, people aren't going to like that.
Well,
it's not going to work.
What if you have, like, the marker and, like, really cool necromorphs?
I don't think that's enough. But that's me. I think
But then
I think you're on the right track. And actually, also looking at this, I should try to figure that this. What we're all looking at is probably from a decade or more ago, a long shot from Game Informer of some of the most important characters at the time. Supposedly they're well written, but every time I look at it, I go, a lot of these characters aren't really well written in today's eyes. But something that strikes me when I heard about it is that Assassin's Creed would be a great way to tell it. You don't tell any of the actual Assassin stories. You pick another one. All you have to do is the setting, and then you tell your own story in that setting. You get to do all the trappings, but then you don't, like, you show what you need to do.
They've tried that,
They
like,
did
2
it.
times.
They made that movie?
They made that
Assassin's
movie twice.
Creed happened.
Twice?
Twice.
I blocked that out.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they're
Okay, well,
both
then they got it wrong,
terrible.
then.
They're
Yep.
so bad.
Okay, I think because the Animus is this crazy thing they go. See, and then let me get back to they keep getting tampered with. It's like all you need to do is leave the touchstones alone and then make a good story, not just a boilerplate story that like just lets you have some of the video game trappings.
Because
like,
this is kind of more my point.
I blocked that out entirely. I'm sorry.
This is my point of like, I guess, like, it'd be cool to go see Isaac Clarke in the plasma, or whatever. Like, that would be cool. But 1, you would then have the, like, Mandarin. And 2, no matter what, it won't live up to the reputation that the fans have.
Exactly. That's the problem.
And
with
I
these.
guess, and that's that thing. And we're not gonna be able to get into that too much in this because I honestly believe this is going to turn into a future KFM as well. On the fan expectation part.
Oh yeah. I'll leave that for morsel for later.
Oh no, we have so much to talk about on this because I haven't even brought up a certain franchise that we're gonna have to talk about here shortly. But one of the things that I wanted to add on, you know, we had the fan expectations, but there's another important piece that I think is involved here in the telling of these stories in the adaptation is not just the specific medium of whether it's film or television, but the medium in which it is. Is it live action? Is it animated? Is it anime? Is it, you know what I mean? Because that adds its own other thing to it. Because part of why Castlevania, I think, works so well is because it is animated. And the studio that did it, it's the same studio that did a fantastic Netflix show called Seis Manos. If you haven't seen that...
Is it the same studio?
Same studio, same people.
Damn.
Yep. And if you haven't seen Seis Manos, I highly recommend it. It is uber violent.
Based on nothing.
But
love it.
It's
inspired by many.
It was fantastic. But I don't think Castlevania would work in another, like, the way it works is partially due to its animation style, the team that's doing it. If you tried to make that live action, I don't think it works.
Now, this is kind of an interesting point, though, is going back to Dead Space, is they did make the animated movie, but I feel like the animation wasn't able to quite capture, like, the absolute visceral
Didn't
nature.
have the budget.
Well, it wasn't able to capture the absolute visceralness of everything. Now, granted, I feel like Castlevania did it, but I feel like the gores are different. I feel like say Dead Space would work really well as mostly practical effects.
Yeah, it's a horror movie.
Yeah, like kind of like in like The Thing, and even this new Mortal Kombat, like they did as much practical effects as they possibly could, which kudos to them, and it looked incredible.
It worked out well for the most part.
Apparently, while Kano was holding the prop heart, somebody was off screen, literally pumping it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's why that scene looked so great.
Like practical effects are, I think, a necessity for that type of body horror, but with Castlevania, since like all of these monsters are just absolutely wild, I feel like if you try to translate that into like either like a CG thing, it would look real wrong.
and I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I think that there is easier transitions for certain film or certain video game franchises to go into certain styles of medium.
But I think, this I think goes back to the whole we want his movies. I think, and I wish I knew why, and this is maybe the KFM part, I think we are drawn to want to see things in live action. I think that excites us. I don't know if it's some like offshoot from cosplay, but like I'm definitely there because you're just like, oh my gosh, I would love like a Metal Gear Solid movie. I want to see real life Big Boss, but it's like all I can do is be excited because it won't match this freaking video game man Big Boss in my head. I can only be disappointed.
Now, here's like, I guess, the interesting question with Mortal Kombat is I think all of us were pretty okay with most of the cast, except for Raiden. Like, the fact that it...
And now that I've had more time to think about it, hear people talk, Shang Tsung is also, like, especially compared to the original, the OG, they're just...
Those are big shoes to fill. To fill Kerry Tagawa.
I will say, like, having, just watched the old Mortal Kombat film and having played Final Fantasy 11 with him in it,
Fantasy 11.
Or Final Fantasy 11. Mortal Kombat 11.
Like, whoa, man, what's going on in Final Fantasy 11?
I've been looking at this banner too much. Anyway, but after playing that, like, I will say he did a pretty damn good job.
Because he knows, the original one, he knows what movie he's in. It's the same thing with Raul Julia as M. Bison in Street Fighter.
Raul Julia.
And I would say Kano in the new one. He is having a blast, and he is eating that scenery. And I think that's, I don't know if that's to video games, but I feel like to video game movies, it's that the characters who know the movie they're in and are just consuming and like are having a fun time. Mm-hmm. Like, has somebody made a video game movie that was just like live action and like fun? Like, I feel like that's kind of what Detective Pikachu is.
Yeah.
It's just like that's what Ryan Reynolds did. It's just it brings fun. Where because like the Mortal Kombat movie has fun moments, but it's not overall aesthetic is not fun.
There's something like from, and there's some things that can explain it. So it's like, none of this is me, taking a dump on, the cast and crew or whatever.
No,
it's
never.
Honestly, like, from the rumblings I'm hearing, they're already looking and casting the sequel.
Of course.
And word is that contracts were set to make a trilogy of films.
That works.
Which I'm fine, because I honestly think that there is a solid groundwork laid within there.
There is promise that I would very much like to see iterated on.
Yeah. And there's a lot that I really did enjoy within it. I really loved Liu Kang and Kung Lao in it, Ludi Lin and Max Huang, I want to say is his name, that played Kung Lao. Kung Lao, I actually thought was really well represented in there, because he is a little arrogant in the games too, and
yeah, he was fantastic. He looked great. He moved great. He sounded like he worked. He was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think the biggest thing is Raiden needs to be Epcar.
Even if it's not Epcar, he just needs to be a bigger personality. Yeah.
It needs to be somebody with presence. I think he's just spoiled us because he has such a presence.
Like, because I guess that was one of those interesting things where this new Raiden doesn't stick out in any way. Like, nope. he doesn't have a powerful voice, and at least the Raiden in the original film was like, he was kind of a jokester and kind of a troll, and like he was
Yeah.
He had some presence.
yeah, he had a presence that was very different from Epcar, but it was still a presence that made him unique. But this guy like is completely just not memorable at all.
Now, so, I'm looking at time, and I want to make sure we bring up.
Oh, I was gonna turn everything on its head.
Oh,
You
okay.
do yours first.
Okay, so we talked about things, this like idealization of bringing things into the real world type of thing in the live action, and and I wonder because like for me, I've reached that point, and granted, I watch a lot of animation, so maybe I'm a little biased within it, where I don't necessarily look at live action anymore as the pinnacle to go to. Granted, I'm one guy. I am not necessarily speaking for the general public. But there is this tendency in adaptations of film is to take another world and almost reverse isekai it. Bring this thing
That's Sonic
into... Yep.
It's time to bring the blue blur.
So we got to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog. But Sonic the Hedgehog was just one in a long line of films where we take X property that you know and love from your childhood
The
and have
Smurfs,
nostalgia
Rocky and Bullwinkle, a bunch of other ones that aren't coming to my mind right now.
from. Well, those are two really
Mario.
good examples.
Mario.
We don't talk about that one.
We don't talk about Mario rules.
But you know what's funny about Mario though? Like as ham-fisted as it was,
Mario's an entire other conversation that needs a lot more backstory.
But no. I was gonna say the Super Mario Brothers Super Show from the
there we go.
'90s
Yeah.
was a fun as heck time. You had a mix of live action and animation segments, and I think it was something just that's a property. And it was a TV series. It knew what it was and knew who it was targeted to. And Captain Lou Albano
Oh gosh.
was killing it.
If you take drugs, kids, you go to hell before you die.
Man, but it is a slice in time that I will never
Yeah.
forget.
No, agreed.
But Sonic, we have to talk about not just from the film. Sonic, but that's the large part of this conversation. But Sonic has had so many different adaptations in different mediums. Even when I was growing up, there were simultaneously 2 Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons at the same time with different casts and different like agendas and different vibes to them.
Different tones entirely.
Yeah. And then you have the comic book adaptations, which you had the Archie comics, and now you have the IDW comics, and both of which are fine properties on their own, but totally different representations of the series. And then you have all of the various things they've done canonically in the video games over the years, and now we have the film. And the film, again, like I said, brought Sonic into the real world. And I've said this before. I went into the Sonic movie with zero expectation whatsoever. And I can recognize that it's not a very good film. Like from from looking at it just strictly as like
As a film.
Film,
standpoint. Yeah.
But did I have fun with it? I absolutely had fun with
I
it.
feel like that's been the thing with a lot of these movies is that they're fun.
Yeah. I had
Sometimes despite themselves.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it, and I will probably go see the sequel. But at the same token, I do feel like a film, like an animated film of the adventures on Mobius with Sonic and friends, would have appealed to me more than bringing Sonic into the human world with James Marsters. And nothing against him, he's a fine actor. He just keeps seeming to find himself in these roles.
Or he's driving down a long dirt road. With
And
an
then all of
animated
a
character in
sudden
the
he has to
passenger
get,
seat.
and then he ends up getting a gift card to Olive Garden. Yeah.
Now, here's an interesting question. I'm gonna make a giant left turn right here, but
You're gonna make a left right.
left right. Well, the big question is, if something is already perfect in its original medium, should it be adapted in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, I feel like that's what this whole conversation has been about, is if you only have expectations for something and it can only fail them, why should you do it? And you're right. We shouldn't.
Like, well, because it's like I look at say Avatar.
Yep.
They've now tried to do adaptations 2 times now, where the first time we don't talk about the first time, and then the second time was such a chaotic development that the 2 creators of Avatar just decided to nope right out of there.
It's interesting now because they are in the middle of developing new stories within that world, and I think that's because this gets where in interesting things, because now it's the original creators,
but that's
working on it, so it's not necessarily an adaptation, but it's a new story within that world.
But that's the thing, is a continuation isn't a retelling of the same story.
I think it's possible. I think with a lot of these people, just I guess the right people haven't been on it to do it, quote unquote, whatever right is.
Well, I have a question. I just want to interject really quickly.
Okay.
Is the Star Wars sequel trilogy an adaptation, or
what?
not, or not
Adaptation
of the existing Star Wars canon, taking it and adapting, making something new?
I feel like it's a similar way from at least from the first maybe 2 from Marvel, where it's just, or the DC stuff, where it's like we get to take all these comics as a wealth of inspiration points that we get to pick and choose what we want, and then we get to spin that into a solid form of a film of what it is, with our own little take and spice on it, I guess.
So, you were saying, Rose?
I think the other example I was going to use is Lion King. Lion King, it's a damn near perfect film. Like, there's really not anything you can go do to Lion King to make it better. So why was it touched?
Money.
It's true, money.
It's always money.
It's always money.
Cynically money.
Now,
But then it's like there's films that have, like, let's face it, Kida is a Disney princess. No one talks about Kida,
You
which
are
makes
so
me
on your freaking Kida horror.
it makes
piece of garbage.
It makes me sad because Kida is one of my favorite Disney princesses. But the thing is, I guess because, like, the film didn't gross very much, they, like, were like, we're gonna forget about this film. So it's like, why isn't that film or Treasure Planet, like, why aren't these films being adapted? Because I think those 2 films would be really cool in live action.
We have talked about remakes, and I really want to turn the car around for the thing that I wanted to make, because we're out of time.
Real quick, since you mentioned Lion King, I think something we haven't mentioned yet, but another medium that's outside of the realm of anything we've talked about, Lion King, Aladdin, a lot of those properties have made very successful Broadway musicals, especially Lion King.
Video game Broadway musical.
Maybe.
I'm gonna whisper closer to the mic just so I make sure. Video game Broadway musical.
My number one fear is as having a repeat of Spider-Man, though.
But what about all the good ones, though?
God of War the musical.
Boy!
Boy!
Oh, like, you joke? But that would actually be pretty... Because you say too many Spider-Man. I say Evil Dead. I say... I say Beetlejuice. I say some other ones. There's been a lot of ones adapted. I don't think they've ever done it for video games. Like, you were joking, but I think of the new God of War. I think... Because at its heart, it's just, like... That's what I feel like. I mean, already, like, the new God of War isn't a great example of this, because it's made to look like a film. It's literally made in one take, quote-unquote, even though it's a video game.
The new God of War, that's another one that's
okay, whatever. I apologize. We're running out of time, and I have an idea that I thought. Okay, so we're talking about video games being adapted into movies. Do you think there are any movies that feel like video games? This was a concept that was always talked to me when I was growing up listening to Gen Xers talk about this stuff.
I've always heard that the Wolverine game was actually really good.
You're not understanding my thing. I'm talking about movies.
That the movie itself, watching it, feels like a video game.
Like, I showed you Big Trouble in Little China, and if that's like... That has always been told to me as a video game movie, and I agree. There's a boss, there's mini bosses, there's different, like, characters, they're picking up weapons, they're fighting, like, that feels like a video game. Escape from New York feels like a video game. It's, here's your player character, here's the objective, there's a couple of side casts, and you're just going to do the thing. Like, it feels very objective-based, just stuff is happening. The Warriors feels like a video game.
By default... more action movies are going to feel like that, just on the narrative structure of them alone. Like Die Hard, you could almost argue, in a certain way, you know, in a certain style of game.
I lied. Okay, Avatar would actually make a really cool game, but
they made one.
They well, that was the thing, is they made one, but I feel like the love wasn't put into it, and it was just a cash grab, so it was terrible.
A little bit.
But like, it kind of it had your player character and like your final boss, like it had like. And like even has progression.
It's video gamey concepts, because not every game that has a story has a good story in a linear sense. In the way that, like I said, like God of War 1's story, bad for an adaptation. God of War quote unquote 4, the whatever you want to call it, where he's in Norse mythology, good. That one's already practically a film. That is a television show with human beings. So I think would be a really cool thing.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it's just people need to pick the right things, and then they actually need to do it right.
Before we wrap up, there is one more franchise I would like to bring up, because I feel like my entire life I have heard rumors that they were going to adapt this into some kind of film or series, and it is yet to happen. And my gut instinct, anytime I hear about it, is to go,
I want to know what this is, because I've got my own gaggle.
I have an instant fear, and I've developed an attitude about it at this point.
Come on, quit beating around the bush. Lay it on me.
The Legend of Zelda.
Ooh, yeah, there was that one. They were maybe, who knows? That was all garbage. I don't want to talk about that.
I did find out that it did almost become a Netflix series, and they pulled the plug partially because they wanted to super work hush hush behind the scenes, and too many people were talking their mouths.
If that was,
I think
if somebody makes, this is my opinion about everything that goes with video games and everything else. If somebody makes something great, it won't matter how far it strays if it is great. And I think the problem is all these times that people stray, it's never great. It's always
One question that I've always asked is, how come they never made a Portal movie?
Because that's not a movie.
But the thing, like,
movie? There's one character that talks.
The thing is, like, I've seen multiple like people that have done like short films.
Yes, works great as a short film,
and like they're really cool. But like, there's multiple stories that you can go follow in Portal, and I think it'd be really neat.
Well, I think that would work great as a like you said, a short film.
Yeah,
I don't think that has enough for a movie.
I think certain franchises will lend itself better to certain styles of adaptation in the way, and this is how I kind of thought about it, because I highly enjoy the manga that has come out based on Zelda. So I go, if they were ever going to adapt it into anything, I could maybe see it as an anime, and I would be probably okay with that.
So yes, I think our kind of ending point on all of our deliberations is, this is complicated, and I feel like, much like, I could say maybe from comic book movies, we haven't gotten there yet. I feel like more old people need to die and more young people need to have their jobs. And maybe we'll get it there. Call back to the other episode where I said don't make heroes become them. So, with that, we are at the end of the episode of Pop Culture Talk Zone. Forward! What do you got?
Yes. Thank you all for listening again. If you want to check out more from myself, you can find me on Twitter at KeepFriendMagic. And you can always check out more Keeping Friendship Magic on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/KeepingFriendshipMagic. And if you really like what you hear from us, you can always throw us some money on Patreon. We're on patreon.com/KFM. We've got a couple little fun benefits for patrons for as little as $1 a month. So, definitely hit us up if you like what you hear.
Rose, what do you got to plug?
You can go find me on Twitter at Nova Roselia. I will probably just remain as a pre-debut VTuber until I get my stuff together, which will hopefully be sooner rather than later, but no promises.
We're rooting for ya. And if you want more of me, Kermit the Grog, I'm going to do the whole social media call out, whatever. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Our videos for Pop Culture Talk Zones and Grog Zone show up here. And if you want to listen in podcast format, find Ramble Rousers on whatever podcatcher of your choice. Please subscribe to that. And if you're on, I think it's Apple Podcasts, please drop us a rating and a review. I've been told through decades of listening to podcasts it makes things better, but I don't actually know it. But hey, let's find out together. So,
Yes.
with that, this is Kermit the Grog with my friends signing off, and we'll catch you next time. Yeah, that's somehow I'm feeling. Woo! Rated wins.
Fatality.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to our patrons, SamuDash, Jason Kuzmak, Statman Dan, NeverendingNerd, Riftwing Designs, and Frenchie McHugh. Without your support, this project wouldn't be possible.